We've all heard about spiritual highs, those moments when we feel connected to everything, when the universe seems to be speaking directly to us, guiding us, filling us with light. But there's another side to the spiritual journey that many don't talk about. It's the spiritual void. It's the space where everything feels empty, disconnected, and lost. And if you're on a spiritual path, you've probably encountered this void more often than you'd like to admit. The spiritual void is not a failure. It's not a sign that you're doing something wrong. In fact, it might be one of the most important phases in your journey, even though it feels like the exact opposite. But how do you know if you're in a spiritual void? What are the signs? Let's dive into this deeply. And as we go along, I want you to ask yourself if any of these resonate with your current experience.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound spiritual lesson.
The first sign that you're in a spiritual void is the overwhelming sense of disconnection from yourself, from others, and even from the universe. It's like you've lost your spiritual anchor. You might still be doing your practices, meditating, praying, reading spiritual texts, but they don't feel the same. The sense of awe, the feeling of deep connection, it's just not there. You feel like you're going through the motions, but nothing is landing. Have you felt this before? Where you once felt like the universe was speaking to you through every little synchronicity, and now it's just silence? This disconnection can be incredibly disorienting. It makes you question everything, your practices, your beliefs, even your purpose. You start to wonder if you've lost your way. And here's where the first mistake happens: you might start to force it. You try harder to meditate, harder to connect, harder to get back to where you were. But the more you push, the deeper the void seems to grow. Why is that? Why do we think that forcing spirituality will somehow bring us closer to the divine? The second sign that you're in a spiritual void is the sense of meaninglessness that creeps in. The things that used to inspire you, the things that used to fill you with purpose, they now feel empty. You might start asking yourself, what's the point? You've been on this journey for so long, and yet it feels like you're back at square one. This feeling of meaninglessness can be terrifying because it strikes at the core of why we're even on this path to begin with. If the spiritual journey no longer holds meaning, then what does? But here's the paradox: the void, this space of nothingness, might be where the deepest transformation happens. Think about it: when you plant a seed in the ground, it first has to go into the dark soil, buried, where nothing seems to be happening. But beneath the surface, everything is happening. The seed is breaking open, roots are forming, and soon it will sprout. The spiritual void is much like this. It feels like nothing is happening, but something deep within you is transforming. Can you trust that the void is part of your growth, even when it feels like everything is falling apart? The third sign is the loss of direction. You used to know where you were going. You had a vision, a sense of the path ahead. But now it's like the road has disappeared. You're walking in the dark with no idea where you're going or why. This loss of direction can feel like a personal failure. You might even start to compare yourself to others on the path who seem to be thriving, who seem to know exactly where they're headed. But comparison, especially in the spiritual realm, is a trap. No two journeys are the same, and what looks like progress on the outside might be something entirely different on the inside. In this darkness, in this lack of direction, you're being asked to let go of control. You're being asked to surrender. And that's one of the hardest things to do, especially for those of us who are used to having a plan, a clear path. But what if the void is asking something else of you? What if it's asking you to stop seeking and start allowing? The fourth sign that you're in a spiritual void is the resurfacing of old wounds, patterns, and shadows. Just when you thought you'd healed something, it comes back. The anger, the fear, the doubt, it all returns, sometimes even stronger than before. You might start to wonder if all the work you've done has been for nothing. But here's the thing, the void brings up these old wounds not to punish you, but because you're ready to face them on a deeper level. The spiritual journey is not a straight line, it's a spiral. You revisit the same wounds, the same patterns, but each time from a new perspective, with more awareness, more strength. Have you noticed that when you're in the void, things from your past start to resurface? Old relationships, old fears, old doubts, they come back, almost as if they're asking for your attention. What if, instead of resisting them, you allowed them to teach you something new? What if the void is actually an invitation to heal on a deeper level than you ever thought possible? The fifth and final sign that you're in a spiritual void is the feeling of being on the edge of something big, even though you can't quite see it. It's like there's a sense of anticipation, a quiet whisper in the background that says, something is coming. But you don't know what it is, you don't know when it will arrive, and you don't know how to prepare for it. All you know is that you're in the in-between, the space between what was and what will be. This liminal space, this void, is uncomfortable because it demands that we sit in the unknown. And as humans, we don't like the unknown. But here's the truth, the unknown is where all possibilities exist. The unknown is the birthplace of transformation. If you knew exactly what was coming next, you'd limit yourself to that one possibility. But when you're in the void, when you're in the unknown, you're actually in the most powerful space you can be in. Can you sit in the void without trying to escape it? Can you trust that the void is preparing you for something greater than you can currently imagine? As you reflect on these 5 signs: disconnection, meaninglessness, loss of direction, resurfacing of old wounds, and the edge of something big, I want you to ask yourself, are you in the void right now? And if you are, can you see it not as a failure or a regression, but as a necessary part of your spiritual evolution? Now that we've touched on the 5 signs of a spiritual void, it's time to explore how we can navigate this space, this dark, uncertain, and often uncomfortable phase of the spiritual journey. You might feel like you're in free fall, with no ground beneath your feet and no clear path ahead. So how do we find our way when all the usual markers of progress, clarity, connection, purpose seem to vanish? The first step in navigating the void is acceptance. This sounds simple, but in practice, it can be incredibly challenging. When we find ourselves in the void, our instinct is often to resist it, to fight against it. We want to get out of the darkness as quickly as possible, to return to a place of light, of certainty, of connection. But here's the paradox: the more we resist the void, the deeper we sink into it. Resistance keeps us trapped, while acceptance allows us to move through it. Take a moment to reflect. Are you resisting the void in your life right now? Are you trying to force your way out of it, to solve it, to make it go away? What if, instead of resisting, you simply allowed yourself to be in it? What if you accepted that this is where you are right now, and that it's okay to not have all the answers? Acceptance doesn't mean giving up. It doesn't mean that you stop seeking or that you abandon your practices. It means that you stop fighting against the present moment. You stop trying to escape the discomfort, and instead, you sit with it. You allow yourself to feel the emptiness, the disconnection, the uncertainty. And in doing so, you create space for something new to emerge. But how do we accept something that feels so difficult, so painful? How do we sit with the void when everything inside us is screaming to get out of it? The key is to shift our perspective. Instead of seeing the void as an obstacle or a setback, what if we saw it as an opportunity? What if we viewed this space not as a punishment, but as a necessary part of our growth? The spiritual void is like the winter season of the soul. Just as nature goes through cycles of growth and dormancy, so do we. The void is our time of dormancy, a time when the external growth slows down, but the internal transformation deepens. Think about it in the winter. The trees shed their leaves and stand bare, seemingly lifeless. But beneath the surface, the roots are growing deeper, preparing for the next season of growth. The same is true for us. The void is the time when our roots grow deeper, when we're forced to turn inward, to connect with the parts of ourselves that we often overlook when everything is going well. It's in the void that we find our true strength, our true resilience. So let me ask you, can you shift your perspective on the void? Can you see it not as a failure, but as an essential part of your spiritual evolution? Can you trust that even though it feels like nothing is happening, profound transformation is taking place beneath the surface? The second step in navigating the void is to embrace stillness. When we're in the void, our first instinct is often to fill the emptiness. We distract ourselves with busyness, with activity, with anything that will take our attention away from the discomfort. But the void is asking us to be still. It's asking us to stop running, to stop filling the space with noise, and to simply sit in the silence. This can be incredibly difficult, especially in a world that values constant movement and productivity. But stillness is where the magic happens. It's in the stillness that we begin to hear the whispers of our soul. It's in the stillness that the insights, the clarity, the direction we're seeking begin to emerge. But stillness requires patience. It requires us to let go of our need for immediate answers for quick resolutions. It requires us to trust that the answers will come in their own time, and that our only job is to remain open and receptive. So I want to ask you, how comfortable are you with stillness? When was the last time you allowed yourself to sit in silence, without distractions, without trying to fix or solve anything? What might you discover if you gave yourself permission to simply be still? The third step in navigating the void is to cultivate trust. This is perhaps the most difficult step because the void challenges our trust in everything, our trust in the universe, in ourselves, in the spiritual path. When we're in the void, it feels like we've been abandoned, like the universe has gone silent, and we're left to figure things out on our own. But this is where trust becomes essential.